the permission structure for violence. You've got polls about political violence. Democrats don't think it's a good idea. Only Republicans. Only people inclined to consume conservative media are now, I think, upward of 50% say that if necessary, violence is okay. You've only got the conduct on one of the two sides.
Who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful action.
So much of the media reaction of Charlie Kirk's death today was utterly insane, as you could expect. I have to imagine that Charlie Kirk is currently looking down at us from heaven and saying, yep, that's the media for you. But I do want to follow through on this video because these people ought to be held accountable. We cannot forget just how some of these characters view us despite the backlash, despite the fact they're now trying to move on from it. Because it turns out, especially over at MSNBC, the coverage today of the Charlie Kirk shooting and ultimate death was so bad that the MSNBC president, on behalf of the entire network, was forced to issue a formal apology and retraction and condemnation of the very content that they put on the air. But it's worth noting they are not alone, because not only did MSNBC spread wildly ridiculous conspiracy theories about how the shooting happened, even though it seemed pretty clear. Furthermore, not only did they blame and use it as a propaganda piece to attack Donald Trump, but perhaps most disgustingly, MSNBC repeated the same exact argument you have heard from the Redditors, from the insane people on TikTok, which essentially states that because Charlie Kirk was quote unquote controversial or far right in their eyes, he essentially had it coming, right? It was okay, or it was justified, or he shouldn't have been surprised at the fact that he got shot. And we've reacted to this. You've seen people saying this, but I think the fact that it was further uttered at MSNBC is all the more relevant because, as I've been saying, when it comes to these crazy radical activists and the base basically of the Democrat Party, you know, there is not nearly as much separation between those crazy radicals and the actual power structures in that party, right? That being the DNC itself, its propaganda arms like MSNBC, as people seem to think. And it turns out that MSNBC are not the only ones who uttered this similar sentiment and ridiculousness. We got likewise comments from BBC, ABC, much more to react to. Not sure if those folks will be retracting as well. But that said, I want to run you through the full chronicle of how MSNBC dropped the ball completely on this. And after all, I think it's what Charlie would have wanted us to do. He was a big critic of the media. We're going to continue on this legacy by talking about this very issue. So that said, let's just start here from the beginning. I want to show you through the timeline. These are even some clips before it was revealed that Charlie Kirk was killed in the shooting, but it was confirmed indeed that he was shot. And you had MSNBC at 3:27 p.m. Eastern time earlier today spreading the absolutely ridiculous and insane theory that maybe it wasn't actually a targeted assassination attempt, maybe it was not a deliberate shooting, but, and I quote, it could have been a Charlie Kirk fan shooting in celebration. Which again makes absolutely no sense, but take a listen.
In which a shooting like this happens.
Yeah, and again, emphasize what you just emphasized. We don't know any of the full details of this. That we don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea about.
Oh yes, clearly that's a possibility, having seen the video or even just reading what had happened even at the time. That's totally a possibility that's reasonable to entertain. Are you freaking kidding me? That is by far one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life, and I want to actually surgically dissect the reasons why. So let's break this down. I want to shooting the gun off in celebration, which of course explains why he would have aimed it horizontally right at Charlie Kirk's neck and hit him. But I guess it was just a firearms accident. You know, he just had a gun he was unloading in the sky because he was really happy to see Charlie Kirk speak. Like, okay, first of all, who do these people think that we are? Who do they think that our type of people, right? Turning Point students, Charlie Kirk supporters, Trump supporters, etc. They think that we do that. We show up at public spaces in the middle of universities and we just get really happy and fire guns into the sky. Like, I want to explain this, and this really does break down and expose, I guess, the way that these like MSNBC academic analysts really view apparently Trump supporters. They think we do that. They think we literally just get around and shoot guns in the sky, not even in the middle of like the countryside, just right in the middle of urban spaces. Yeah, that's a normal thing. That's a totally reasonable thing to suspect maybe could have happened. Do they think this is some type of Eastern European wedding in the Balkans or something? Or they just view us all like some Wild West characters from Tombstone who ride through on horses, like shooting our Colts in the sky? Like what? Or what? I don't want to laugh, but it's actually genuinely that stupid, okay? This possibility could have never been entertained. I do not care, frankly, how much you want to play the plausible deniability, and I'm sure they will, about, well, it was a developing situation. We didn't have the details. I don't care. By this time the video was out. By this time it was very clear. Someone was not shooting off their gun in celebration. It's a totally abject and like abstract, I should say, and ridiculous thing to even claim. It's like saying that Charlie Kirk basically got abducted by aliens or something in the middle of the speech. And no, it was never something you should have even uttered on air. Totally stupid, totally ridiculous, totally another word I want to use, okay? And there you have, and you know, simultaneously, these are the same people who are going to run around and tell us in reaction to a situation like this, and they always do, look, we're the media. We have to be responsible about how we report information, and all of you, you know, online people need to not rush to conclusions or jump in before the facts. But then simultaneously, they just do stuff like this. Yeah, it could have just been, they were having like a Balkan celebration, and then they accidentally shot Charlie Kirk in the middle of Utah, famous for, you know, that type of stuff, for, you know, the Serbian or Albanian traditions, apparently. Okay. I'd also like to remind people, if you remember, that this is exactly the same crap they did during the Boulder, Colorado terrorist attack, where a Arab guy who was illegally in the country, he was from Egypt, committed that attack in Boulder, Colorado. And the folks over at MSNBC were running around claiming that they believed the suspect was a white man. Yeah, newsflash, it was not a white man. And they were just saying, oh, look, but we heard that from the reports, despite the fact that, well, you claim the reports are unconfirmed, but you're still spreading them, and then not at all apologizing when you say things that are really clearly very stupid. So just one example. Again, I don't care how old the clip was. This was always a really stupid thing to say, and they just said it. And of course, why did they say it? Because they were just trying to downplay the fact that it was actually an assassination. It was actually an attempt of political violence, because they, of course, did not want to admit it. Within minutes of Charlie Kirk being shot, you further saw the type of behavior at MSNBC. His condition at the time was unknown, but MSNBC host Katie Tur said that, well, this is really bad because Trump is going to use it as a justification for something. And that's the real story here, not the fact that the guy got shot. Yeah, take a listen.
After one of the Doge employees was allegedly attacked in Washington, D.C., that's what Donald Trump used as justification to send in federal troops into Washington, D.C. to get things under control. The carjacking situation, he used that. And I know it's hard to predict the future, Mark, but you can imagine the administration using this as a justification for something.
Yeah, well, you can see the obsession in their brains that that's the first thing that comes to mind. But nonetheless, can't even say I necessarily have a problem with it. You know, any action that will make it safer for conservatives to express their ideas in America, anything that will stop violent, psychotic leftists trying to assassinate us is probably good policy. Okay, I know MSNBC probably disagrees, but it is ultimately what it is. Now, let's get into the really dumb thing said on this segment, where a former Bush-Cheney strategist and Kamala supporter, Matthew Dowd, which is basically the summation of what MSNBC is, right? It's a bunch of old neocons who are now Democrats because Donald Trump is really bad. And yes, as I brought up before, basically said here that Charlie Kirk deserved to be shot because he was quote unquote far right and controversial and all these things. Take a listen, just so you understand. Yes, they did really say this, not on TikTok, on MSNBC.
Talk to me about the environment in which a shooting like this happens.
Yeah, and again, to emphasize what you just emphasized, we don't know any of the full details of this. That we don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea about this. But following up what was just said, he's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions. And I think that's the environment we're in, that people just, you can't stop with these sort of awful thoughts you have and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place.
Matt.
And that's the unfortunate environment we're in.
Yeah, no, he actually just said that. So Charlie Kirk was pushing hate speech. And in his words, hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which lead to hateful action, aka violence. Of course, once again, as I said to JB Pritzker, completely ignoring the fact that the violence was not committed by one of his supporters, it was committed against him. Against him. So in other words, this is the argument. If you say things that deranged psychotic leftists like Matthew Dowd or the shooter here or anyone else in the world basically disagrees with, you should fully expect for them to try to take your life because of it. Like, these people literally cry out in pain as they strike you. What a ridiculous argument. In other words, you said something mean that I disagree with, and therefore, because left-wingers in this country are really like mentally unstable, violent, unhinged people, you should fully expect and, don't be surprised when people try to commit violence against you because of that. Again, never once speculating perhaps that, if you want to take that route, maybe the radical rhetoric against Charlie Kirk, right? Because hateful thoughts. How about this? All right, I got it. Matthew Dowd, you're half right. Hateful thoughts by leftists create hateful words from leftists, which create hateful action and violence from leftists. There you go, buddy. I fixed it for you. See how it's a straight line? Not hateful thoughts, hateful words. Oh, the other side just came to get you because of it. There you go. But anyways, I'd like to point out, by the way, that this is not an isolated case. Okay, you heard this all across the media today. Take a listen as well to ABC and BBC, who said very similar things about how he was controversial, and let's really point that out. So, maybe this is why that happened. Which, look, also to be clear about this. Let me be clear, actually. I am 100% condemning all violence. I'm not saying that I root for it to happen or want it to happen. However, these people, if they want to apply that logic, do you understand that the meanings hate speech, controversial, radical, etc., are purely subjective? So in the case where this happened, again, totally condemn. We're talking hypothetical here. We don't want this to happen. But in the case where it did happen to one of your own, would it be justified for us to get out here on the internet and say, well, that person was controversial. That person was engaging in hate speech. Says who? My subjective opinion. Or can you just simply say that, violence is not okay because you disagree with people, which is what it's really about? Anyways, just want to make that point. Further, though, here is BBC and ABC saying similar things.
It is a really shocking moment, and I was thinking, I've never shared a Trump post in my life. I will contemplate sharing this one. But what I will say with a caveat, he wasn't admired and loved by all. So that's an exaggeration, but the truth is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Sorry, Matt,
let me finish.
Go ahead.
It doesn't matter.
Kirk has been shot during an event at Utah Valley University. The founder of Turning Point USA, a conservative student organization, is known for his outspoken views on politics, culture, religion, often taking his messages to colleges and universities, sparking sometimes pretty heated debates on campus. Let's get right to our chief investigative correspondent, Aaron Katursky. Aaron, what do you know?
Two law enforcement sources confirmed to ABC News, Kira, that Charlie Kirk indeed was shot as he was speaking at an outdoor event at Utah Valley University. You're right, his presence there at the university had divided the campus, according to an article in the school paper, where there were people on both sides debating whether he should even be allowed to bring his message, often loyal to the agenda of President Trump, to campus. But he was speaking at this outdoor event in a courtyard. We've seen some video of that event. A shot rings out. The entire crowd goes scattering.
You can't help but notice, too, the BBC lady who just is laughing during the whole story. And frankly, that's how a lot of psychotic individuals feel in this country right now, right? They're cheering for this. They're laughing at this. They would feel the same way towards, frankly, any conservative it happened toward. And that's not me calling for anything. I just want people to understand this is how a lot of people view conservatives in America. And it's sick and it's twisted and it's wrong, but it's reality, right? I'd also like to ask the question here, because I keep hearing this talking point of Charlie Kirk was really controversial. He was engaging in hate speech. He was far right. And I notice a lot of media spin to basically accost him as this like David Duke fringe radical figure of the far right and not a mainstream voice of the Republican Party. But I'd like to point out that that's exactly who Charlie Kirk was, right? He was a mainstream figure in the conservative movement. He runs one of the largest Republican-adjacent organizations in the entire country. He spoke at the freaking RNC. He is basically, or he was, I should say, basically an informal advisor to Donald Trump. Big planner, by the way, of the presidential transition and all that. So just remember, we're not talking about some like fringe crazy guy. We're talking about mainstream, at this point, GOP and definitely mainstream MAGA, right? But that's exactly the point. This is what people need to understand. That's how they're trying to castigate anyone who is basically just a Trump voter or Trump supporter, right? All 77 million of them. This is who you are. You are like this far-right, pariah, white supremacist, like cartoonishly bad type of character. And so I asked the question as well, what was it that Charlie Kirk said that was supposedly the hate speech or so bad? Was it moments like, and by the way, is this where he was controversial? Is it moments like this where he actually condemned political violence and said it's really bad because after all, that's going to be really triggering to leftists who are the biggest supporters of political violence and simply can't control themselves? Is that the answer there? Is that why he's so controversial? I don't know, just asking. But
I go around universities and have challenging conversations, and because that's what is so important to our country, is to find our disagreements respectfully, because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens.
I've never seen someone do this.
Well, it's a growing trend because people like me are facing violence, assault, the left. Yes, the campus Antifa. I've been stormed out of restaurants. I've been assaulted publicly, multiple death threats.
Okay, so what's your goal in all this?
There's more people that agree with me than some people would actually believe, and they come out of the woodwork when I do stuff like this. We record all of it so that we put it on the internet so people can see these ideas collide. When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens, because you start to think the other side is so evil and they lose their humanity.
Ah, see what I'm saying, guys? Now it all makes sense. Oh, there you go. That's why Charlie Kirk was so controversial to the violent, crazy, bat blank, insane left. Because he said hate speech comments such as, when people stop talking to each other, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens. Yeah, we should talk to each other civilly and respectfully. That's the hateful opinion. Got it. Now it all makes sense. I'd like to just further point out here as well that even over at TMZ, I didn't know TMZ was even all that political, but you can hear on the live stream 30 seconds before they announce it on air that Charlie Kirk has passed away. They're so happy to hear the news and can be heard here clapping and cheering as it happens. So check out this video.
3 o'clock in Utah time, which is 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern. Janet, go to have somebody look at the Fox. Trump just posted that Charlie Kirk is dead.
All right, so is this ready to pull the trigger? We can get Trump cut in a second.
What did Trump say?
Yeah, again, mainstream attitudes on the left. We're not talking about a couple of fringe crazies here. All of that said, let's now bring you back to MSNBC, where they're admitting their coverage here was so bad. Now you have a statement from MSNBC President Rebecca Cutler, who says, during our breaking news coverage of the shooting of Charlie Kirk, Matthew Dowd made comments that were inappropriate, insensitive, and unacceptable. We apologize for his statements, as has he. There is no place for violence in America, political or otherwise. So it is indeed that bad that they had to apologize for it. I guess kudos to the network for pushing back on this guy. I mean, I guess that deserves credit. But I would just like to remind people, a tiny apology is not going to change the hearts and minds of hundreds of thousands, probably, of people in this country, maybe even millions, who feel exactly the same exact way as Matthew Dowd. So that said, guys, there you have it. There is the chronicle on the media ridiculousness of covering this whole situation. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, and peace.